fucking. There we go. What's up, horror fans? Pete here in my garage, and I'm ready to talk about some Apes movies with my good friend over there, Dr. Zayas God. Dr. Zayas, Dr. Zayas, Dr. Zayas. So, Danny, you revealed to me last week a truth that kind of blew my mind, that you have not seen all of the original Planet of the Apes movies.
Yeah, I was OG only. 1968's original was the only ape movie I saw. And it's funny because my dad had told me stories about how, growing up, him and his friends had gone to see like all night movie marathons of the Planet of the Apes movies. And that's kind of how I feel like I've been the last couple of days laying in bed. I've been under the weather. I missed a few days of work. And like being a child, the only advantage of being sick is getting to lay in bed and watch movies. And I've knocked out several of the original Planet of the Apes sequels. I think I only have one movie left, Battle for the Planet of the Apes.
Yep.
I have shorts up on the channel. I just put a short up yesterday for the original, which is what we're going to be talking about today. That and its first sequel, Beneath the Planet of the Apes.
Yes, sir.
And yeah, we were just talking before we went live about how, like, I'm just finding out all of these like amazing consistencies to the reboot trilogy. Caesar's first word being no, the fact that there's a character called Caesar. These are all things established way back in the early 1970s with the sequels. And yeah, I love these movies. I don't even know if I would say, even though there's I wouldn't even go so far as to say there's a bad one. They are weird. The original movies are fucking weird. Like,
yeah.
There's nothing funnier to me than like the first half. And next week's video is going to be on I think the last three movies in the original.
Yeah.
But just, there's nothing funnier to me than the first half of Escape from the Planet of the Apes effectively being like, let's take Cornelius and Zira around the city.
Yes.
Have them go shopping at the mall. And it's so weird. They're charming and weird, and I love them. And yeah, I'm really glad we decided to dig deep into this franchise that has been going on now for almost 50 years.
Yeah, 68.
No, more than that.
60.
1968. Yeah, 60 years.
Yeah. It's a franchise that I got into, I think, in my like late teens, maybe even early 20s. No, it had to be late teens because I have a VHS box set of it. And I was telling you this last recording that it has all the original 5 movies, and then there's this like amazing behind the scenes documentary that just goes through each movie and talks about like where they came up with the idea and like some of the issues that they had making the movies. For that first movie, it's actually based on a book by a French author named Pierre Boulle. And Pierre Boulle, his version of the Planet of the Apes.
I think it's Boulle. Pierre Boulle.
Boulle.
I'm not
Okay.
sure. It's French.
Yeah. So I'll say Boulle because I always respect your versions and stuff. So Pierre Boulle, he wrote this book, and it's funny because it's actually different from the movies. In this Planet of the Apes, they have like cars and fucking, they wear regular clothes and stuff, not their cool Planet of the Apes outfits from these 60s movies and 70s movies. But it's a different kind of movie altogether, or a book story. And one interesting thing about Pierre Boulle, did you do any research on him, Danny, by any chance?
Well, I know that his two most famous books are Planet of the Apes and The Bridge on the River Kwai. And
right.
Michael Wilson, who wrote Planet of the Apes, co-wrote Planet of the Apes, he had written Bridge on the River Kwai a couple of years earlier, and that movie went on to win Best Picture, and I believe it won David Lean and a certain Jedi, Alec Guinness, Best Actor. there's a lot of Oscar connections
Yup.
when you dig into Michael Wilson writing Bridge on the River Kwai, the director of the original Planet of the Apes, Franklin J. Schaffner, 2 years later would direct Patton, which won Best Picture, and he
Right.
won Best Director at the Oscars. George C. Scott, of course, won Best Actor for playing Patton in the titular role. So there's a lot of like real gravitas to the original film. Heston was a big time actor. Obviously, it's co-written by Rod Serling, who I think we have a deep appreciation of for The Twilight Zone. It won an honorary Oscar for makeup. That was John Chambers for obvious reasons.
Yes.
But yeah, Pierre Boulet. I mean, if you're gonna write two books that get turned into movies, you got two pretty good ones there. Now, I read that Planet of the Apes, like you were saying, it was supposed to be much more almost Back to the Future 2-esque, future-esque.
Yeah.
But they just didn't have the money for that and the
Right.
budget, and they decided let's just go with the kind of, the kind of architecture that we saw in the original film, with
Yeah.
where it feels like a step above human evolution, but not quite at that, like, obviously advanced technological stage.
Yeah. Yeah, the design and stuff in the original movie is so impressive, and they go into it in that documentary. And it's really interesting, like the things that they have to do because of budget restraints, because it really is its own world, its own aesthetic. If you were to like dress up like one of these characters, like people would obviously right away recognize you because of those ape masks, especially the masks that kind of go like this for every character, right? But their outfits too, like how there's the chimpanzee outfit and there's the orangutan outfit, there's the gorilla outfit, and they have these kind of like weird markings on them. It's its own thing, its own franchise. Like it's not as big, obviously, as like Star Wars or Star Trek, but it is sizable. And before, it's in this weird time where Star Trek was on TV before it, and then Star Trek was gone, and then Star Wars wasn't in theaters yet, and then this was kind of the thing for sci-fi guys.
The entire franchise
Yeah,
it's 5 movies in 6 years,
yeah, yeah,
and and Battle for the Planet of the Apes, which was the fifth film, came out in '73, which is 4 full years before Star Wars came out. So
yep,
if you wanted sci-fi cinema in
yeah,
the late '60s, early '70s, you had to go ape because there was really not much else. And listen, I'll die on the sword. I think the original Planet of the Apes is one of, if not the greatest science fiction film ever made. I think it holds up. Even it's known now. I think it because of things like The Simpsons and because of the reboot trilogy. I think it there's this kind of misconception that it's known for its twist ending, or it's known for Charlton Heston's iconic line reads, whether you think they're over the top or perfect for the character.
yeah,
But just having rewatched this, and what I always loved about it is the conversations that the characters are having, the whole juxtaposition of a character like Dr. Zaius, who is both the head of science and the minister of the faith, and
right,
those deep questions of, like, of ape society, the whole ending scene in the cave where Cornelius is trying to show these human artifacts, and would a human doll, would the doll talk, you know
yes, yes,
and it asks these amazing questions, and then it ends with, and I don't think this is like hyperbolic to say, one of the greatest endings of all time. I think the twist ending has kind of been co-opted in recent decades. The whole Shyamalan thing. Uh, it kind of like, while his original films, his first films were amazing, they've kind of like bastardized the twist ending to like just be this comes out of nowhere, doesn't really make sense, but it's like whoa, blah, blah.
Right.
And this movie did it in a way that I can only imagine what it must have been like to have been sitting in that movie theater in 1968, and when the camera pans back on the Statue of Liberty, I I, I wish I could have been there. I
Yeah.
that's like if I had a time machine and I can go back in time for like 5 movies, Planet of the Apes is on there. Like what that must have been like, and then to like, you know, 1968, there's barely television, there's no internet, of course, so it that surprise probably held for a long time. I think I
Mm-hmm.
brought this up last week. I got so mad when I walked into a Suncoast Video back in the late 90s, and they were
Yeah.
selling the first solo DVD of Planet of the Apes, and the Statue of Liberty is on the box. And I
Yeah.
guess okay, it was by the late 90s. It's 30 years later. I guess okay, everybody knows the twist by then. But
Right.
still, it's like you don't sell a DVD box of The Sixth Sense with, you know, the tagline starring Bruce Willis, who's really dead the whole movie. Like you don't put
Yeah.
the spoiler on the
Yeah.
box. And I remember being so frustrated by that because there are always people who've never seen these things.
Yeah.
And but I absolutely love this first film. I think it's a almost perfect movie. And I love the characters, the makeup, the dialogue in it. I think it's one of the most well written films. Um, yeah, I could wax poetic about Planet of the Apes for hours.
Okay. Well, we'll keep it confined to one, but what's it's funny though because there's certain things that get spoiled for you when you're a kid and you're growing up by like osmosis. They get spoiled. The Simpsons, they were pretty bad about it. Like they have the Dr. Zayas musical where you got your, screen name, your Twitter handle, and stuff. Um,
Right?
but there's multiple Planet of the Apes references just on The Simpsons. There's like a sequence in The Simpsons where they go to like pick up kids at a daycare or maybe even like Sunday school, and it's just like that sequence where the humans get captured by the gorillas in this movie. They play the same music.
Yep.
The shots are kind of the same. There's a
I'll give
scene.
you
Go
I'll
ahead.
give you another. I'll give you another one from our childhood that ruined Planet of the Apes. What actually ruined Planet of the Apes for me?
Spaceballs.
Spaceballs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, of course.
the ending of Spaceballs. I saw Spaceballs when I was 5 years old, and I had not seen Planet of the Apes. And I think like there was a long period in between. So
Yeah,
I think it was like I saw Spaceballs at 5. I laughed at a joke I didn't really understand,
yeah,
and then years went by. I saw the Simpsons episode. Years went by, and then I finally saw probably Planet of the Apes when I was a early teenager, the original, and like it still had that like shocking feeling to it, but it
hmm,
obviously like I was like, oh, now I get every one of those references from all of these pieces of media that
yeah,
I'd been taking in my entire life. But yeah, Spaceballs. What's that coming out of her nose?
yeah.
Oh shit! There goes the planet.
There goes the planet. Yeah, yeah. It's funny because I think I was aware that it was Earth and that you're going to see the Statue of Liberty at the end when I first watched it. But when you watch this movie, I don't know how you personally feel about Charlton Heston, but I think for Taylor, he's like so angry at humanity and he's like so like negative about humanity, and then he gets this horrible treatment at the hands of the apes. I think that you really are truly feeling for him where you're like, man, this fucking guy, like, won't they just like see that he can talk or like write, and then that'll save him. I feel like you really feel for him, and regardless of the surprise, like you're invested in Taylor and you really want him to like get away from the apes. Like as far as Charlton Heston goes, how many of his movies have you seen? Like have you seen the Ten Commandments and
So
yeah.
I've seen most of the Ten Commandments. I honestly don't know if I've ever watched the whole movie from beginning to end. I know my mother would like yell the Edward G. Robinson lines when I was growing up. Like that was just one of her things.
Yeah.
What do you think of your Moses now? Huh? Like
Right.
she would just
Right.
like we'd be sitting at the dinner table. We'd be like, Mom, do you have like weird movie Tourette's? Like what's going on?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but so I've seen parts of that. I have seen the Omega Man, which again I learned about from The Simpsons, the Omega Man, which was a uh,
Treehouse of Horror.
Treehouse of Horror. Uh, I've seen Soylent Green. I've seen a lot of his like later,
Genre.
post Planet of the Apes genre movies, and I, the thing with Charlton Heston is he comes from a generation where the movie stars were just movie stars, you know,
Yep.
and I don't want this to come across, but he was just a man,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
He was like to me, him and Marlon Brando go very same similar vein where they have this penchant for what we would call overacting, but I think that was probably the style that they were trained in.
Right.
And
Right.
and and I'm going to be honest, like I cannot imagine another actor
No.
doing the Taylor character. I can't
Right.
imagine those lines
Right.
sounding any different. You know, as over the top as "Get your stinking paws off me, you damn!" Like as
Yeah.
even the scene on the beach at the end, like excuse me, I can't imagine those lines coming out of any other actor's mouth. And I think
Yeah.
that's a tribute to Heston's strength as an actor. Like he just comes across as a leading man.
Oh
And
yeah.
and whether he's, you know, talking to Cornelius and Zira, whether he's, you know, talking to Dr. Zayas in the Tribune, at the tribunal, or whether he's doing action sequences. Like he just, like I almost, it's hard for me to even picture a scene in this movie where he has a shirt on,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and
In the,
and
in the
which
very
is weird.
beginning.
Yeah, which is weird because, like, we're going to talk about Beneath in a few minutes. The fact that they cast James Franciscus in Beneath the Planet of the Apes, it felt like that meme of like, we have Charlton Heston, right? And it's like, no, we have Charlton Heston at home. And it's
Right.
like James Franciscus is like Charlton Heston at home.
Yes.
And like they cast somebody that looked very similar, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and it and then they're on screen together at the end. And you're like, okay. But I just I can't imagine anyone else as Taylor. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that says pretty much everything about his performance is, yeah, it is gleefully over the top, but it's perfect for this movie.
Yes. You know, it's funny because you've kind of mentioned some action scenes and some scenes of dialogue. This movie has some that are iconic action scenes. I would say that when the gorillas capture the humans at the beginning, that's an iconic scene. And when he's running around the ape city and the apes are chasing him, that's another iconic scene. And there's multiple scenes where there's like shootouts and he's like punching the apes and stuff. There's a lot of action in this movie, but I would say that a good 75% of it is dialogue. And it's this like commentary on evolution, science versus religion, uh, just the way that animals are treated, the way that people are treated. There's so much in these movies, but especially this first movie. And I think that like it's very reminiscent of Star Trek, where there's action in Star Trek. There's tons of action in Star Trek, but it's really the debates and the discussions. And I think that you have a lot of these British actors portraying apes, including the great Roddy McDowall as Cornelius. Now, one thing I'm going to say is Roddy McDowall, he's kind of like the Andy Serkis of this franchise, where he's like in this one, then he goes on to Escape. I mean, he's in Beneath as well. And then he's Caesar in the fourth movie, right?
He's
So,
actually not. He's actually not in Beneath. Beneath was the only film they actually had a different actor under the Cornelius makeup in Beneath.
Oh
Um,
shit. Okay.
and because I think he had committed to a different movie at the time. But he is, which is hilarious because they put Roddy McDowall on a lot of the box art of Beneath the Planet of the Apes. But yes, he is, of course, him and Kim Hunter are in Escape, and then he returns for both the final two movies. He is the face of this franchise, so to speak.
Yeah, and with faces like Andy Serkis obviously had this ability to he knows exactly how to move his body, his facial features to convey emotions through a digital character. Roddy McDowall, Kim Hunter, Maurice Evans, they understood the mannerisms of apes and they're like, okay, if I move my face this way, it's going to make this prosthetic mask move this way and it's going to look like an ape. Like they did their very best considering it's not CGI. It's not someone like putting a CGI model of an ape over them. You know, I think they do a really great job. I actually think that Kim Hunter is the MVP ape for this movie. Like we always talk about Cornelius, Dr. Zaius, but really it's Dr. Zira, and like her face is so ridiculously expressive. And every time she reacts to things that Charlton Heston does, like her face like lights up. And I think
Yeah.
that she's really the like kind of the emotional core of this adventure. You
I
know?
loved I loved reading on IMDb that Kim Hunter approached Charlton Heston backstage and he had no idea who she was because he had only ever been on screen with her while she was in makeup, and like they ended up laughing about it later.
That's
But
fucking awesome.
I love Kim Hunter in these movies. I think you're dead on with her expressiveness through the makeup. Um, because she's the first ape that we see that isn't a like a combative force.
Yep.
She's the human psychologist or and we find out later in the other movies that she's done a lot of like medical experimentation on humans and surgeries on humans, and it's like she is in it for the knowledge,
Yep.
and I think it also she's the first character you see where you realize that there are different types of apes.
Yep. Yep.
Obviously, Dr. Zaius and the other orangutans come in later, but I think that's a big part of this original franchise, and it becomes a big part even of the reboot series as well. Uh, I even love how in the later films the word monkey is almost considered like a racial slur, and they're like, don't call us monkeys, like
Right.
we're apes."
Right.
And then of course there's the different types of apes, and I love that aspect to it, that like that world building
Yep.
aspect to it. I just wanted to make a comment because you mentioned something about like how this movie has so much dialogue in it, and I feel like that is the key component of great science fiction,
Agreed.
is that great science fiction is not about, as as weird as this might sound, it's not about the special effects and the makeup and the characters. It's about the questions that are being asked and how thought provoking the movie is.
Right.
And when I think of the great science fiction films, all of them have amazing effects or makeup. We just
Right.
covered not too long ago. We were talking about Alien,
Yep.
and Alien has one of the greatest monsters ever,
Ever. Yeah.
but it's also got incredible dialogue about workers' rights. It's got
Yep.
incredible dialogue about uh, corporate bureaucracy and things of that nature. And even you go into movies like The Thing and Blade Runner and even Star Wars and Star Trek, there's always great dialogue moments that carry the effects. And then
Exactly.
you get short bursts of like amazing action adventure effects, and you're like, oh, that's why this movie is great. But then on rewatch, you realize it's what keeps me coming back to these movies is these characters and the questions and all the things that we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, 1000%. I forget just how awesome Taylor is in this movie. He has this little speech before he goes into cryo sleep in the very beginning about humanity. And then he's walking around with his astronaut buddies after they've crashed. And he's saying all these cynical things. He's like, oh, everyone you ever knew is dead. And like, you're the last man in the universe. And he's just like real fucking cynical and arrogant. And then his whole world gets turned upside down once they see these apes. It's funny because they travel so far into the future. They're all the way in the year 3978. And so it makes sense that the remnants of our society are like underground and you can't really see them. There's a few that are on the surface, but it's this whole new world that's grown out of our apocalypse. And I think that when you first see that, when you first have that ape raid, I've already kind of mentioned this multiple times today, but it's just shot so well where the humans are all sitting around this watering area, which is very reminiscent of the sequence in the new one,
Kingdom, yeah.
Right. I mean, obviously
almost perfect.
Shot for shot. Yeah, yeah. And then you hear this fucking like roar noise. I hadn't seen this in a while, so I was like, oh, isn't it like a horn or something I hear at first? But it's this just kind of weird fucking roar. Like you're like, what is that? And before the roar noise, all the humans kind of pause and stop. And they look, and they're very much like deer or something in this sequence. Then, like when the gorillas show up, first you just see these like sticks coming through the tall grass. And you're like, what is going on here? And then finally you get this sequence where there's an ape on a horse and you see them and you're like, oh my God, which would have just been like mind blowing back in the 60s, I think. That whole sequence, it's intense. Charlton has to get shot in the throat. His friend gets shot. But it's interesting because the apes don't talk until that whole sequence is done. And then do you know what the very first word the apes say is?
No.
Okay. No, they don't say no. They don't say no. It's just funny. They actually say smile. I was like, okay, that's the first time they talk. It's when they go to take a picture.
Yes.
And they're all posing and he's like, smile. And then the others are like, oh. Like I just always remember that. And it's just like, they just treat the humans like garbage. There's all these fucking like humans hanging upside down, like slabs of beef, like the predator just captured them. It's just this like really fucked up sequence. And it's just downhill from there for Taylor.
Yeah. And I love like you were talking about, like the cynical dialogue at the beginning, and then he gets shot in the throat. So there's a reason why he's not talking, and we get this prolonged, like nearly 30-minute section of the film where we know who he is. We've heard him, but he's this advanced human who's making like hand gestures to Zira, bright eyes, and I think that not enough is given to, again, it's like that famous line delivery of "get your stinking paws off me," but there was 30 minutes of buildup to that line, because from the time he gets shot in the throat and captured, that is a long period of time.
Absolutely.
And so you as an audience member, you like kind of fall into this world now, this ape world, and you kind of forget that you are dealing with a human character who we've known and we've met and we've heard talk. And then when he finally yells that line, it's just fantastic. And he's between the trying to pass notes and I love the scene where he writes in the sand.
Yeah.
and Dr. Zaius is like, fuck out of here with that shit.
Yeah.
And he like wipes it off with his feet. I'm like,
I love that part so much because he does it and then he's like, hey, look, look. But then fucking Nova has already wiped it away and then he gets mad at Nova and he pushes her and then the other guy fights him. I love that scene so much. Um, yeah, that's actually my favorite part of the movie is the part where he can't talk, but he's trying to convince Zira and everyone, you know, and he eventually grabs her and he's able to write words. And that just blows her mind. And we're talking about like her emotive reactions and her lighting up her face. I just love seeing her eyes get wide when she makes that connection that he can write. He's intelligent. Yeah, that's my favorite part of the movie is just basically where he can't talk for a while. And then you've already kind of mentioned it a few times, but that delivery of when he says, get your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape. It's so well set up because he's running through the ape city. You see like the church and you see lawgiver, you get kind of an idea for their own culture. You have a sequence where he's in a museum and there's like a kid and a mom and they get freaked out because they see him and he's on display and it's just like the Museum of Natural History with like gorillas on display. There's multiple times where the apes use all their tricks, like the nets and the little fucking leash things that they use, and he's able to get away. There's like a shot where like Charlton Heston goes like over the camera, and you like look right up at his crotch. You
Yeah,
know?
no,
And they do their fucking trick where like the gorillas, they take ropes and they go over this like little bridge that's in the air, and they pull his net up into the air as they go down. It just like visually looks so cool. And then it just is like, get your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape. And like Charlton Heston's teeth aren't that great. And there's like a real close up and they're kind of yellow and like craggy. And his face is just like this all contorted. It's just like this fucking mic drop, iconic movie moment. And like, because
yeah.
he says it, you see the ape's reactions and it's just silent. It's so good.
And just all the little touches that almost serve to like break the tension of like, oh, human see, human do, you
Yeah,
know,
right.
or and lines like that that get uttered, and I love, and this comes across much later in the film when they're on the beach where Dr. Zaius basically admits that he knows that humans, you know, that apes evolved from humans, and he basically admits that like he was terrified of Taylor the moment he saw him because he knew that this could be the
And
downfall of ape kind. And it's it it just adds so much weight to everything that we've seen beforehand.
yeah,
This is a movie that, as great as it must have been, excuse me, to watch that first time, it does get better on rewatch because you
absolutely.
start to pick up on these things that, you know, like, oh, what was Dr. Zaius's motivation in that trial? You know, why are they so content on not believing a word that he says? And then you know, as somebody who's just literally watched Beneath, Escape, and Conquest back to back to back, you see like how what the effects of what a turning point that was for you know the ape civilization,
Yeah.
because you know we'll talk about Beneath in a minute, but it almost immediately goes into, you know, they go from like, oh look, it's a human, to okay, you want to blow up the world, all right.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, we could spend a long time talking about the original movie, and we already kind of have. But if we're going to include Beneath, I think that that's kind of our transition right there. Because Beneath is so final. And I know that when I watched the documentary, I think they talked about why they made it so final and apocalyptic. But it's weird to have this like franchise where essentially part two is the whole world just died, you know?
And again, part three, the ending of part three is very similar to that because part three ends with like every character that we've met and know and have grown to love over several movies is basically shot and killed, and you're like, oh, that's the end. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like every movie in this franchise ends, and you're like, how the fuck are they going to follow this up?
Right. Right.
And
And,
they
and
keep coming up with ways.
right. Yeah, and they're gut punch endings, right? Like Charlton Heston finally gets away from the apes. You kind of feel good for him and Nova. And then it's like, oh no, you're actually on Earth, and we've destroyed ourselves. Then in the second one, it's like they just fucking destroy the world, and the narration is ridiculous too, where it's like on a planet is like there's a medium-sized sun, and there's this insignificant little green planet, and everything has died. He says something like that. You're like, okay, I guess we're fucking dead, And then the third one, yeah, they just kill off the apes that did survive. Um, the second one, I really should have gone back and watched the making of documentary again. But the second one is very interesting to me because it's almost like a retread of the first one. It's very different from the movies that we watch nowadays, because the movies that we watch nowadays are legacy sequels often, and they try to do something original in the world at first, and then it just becomes a retread of the original movie, like The Force
This is the
Awakens.
opposite.
Right. Like The Force Awakens or like Alien Covenant. This is the opposite. It's like a retread, and then it gets all fucking weird at the end, right?
So I'm so glad you brought that up, because having watched this for the very first time, my first thought watching this for the first probably 40 minutes, 45 minutes of this 140-minute movie,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, an hour and 40-minute movie, was like, this feels unnecessary. It's basically another ship lands. It's another bronze, manly man with a nice trimmed beard. It's
Yeah.
he meets Nova, he meets Zira and Cornelius,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, this, and he discovers that they're on Earth. He goes into this tunnel. He finds this cave that leads to an underground tunnel where all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, it's old New York.
Yep.
And that's kind of cool. But then the last half of this movie goes completely bonkers. And what I was going to say to you is, it feels like this movie may have had, and I don't know this for sure. I'd love to do some more behind the scenes research. It
Yeah.
feels like there were a lot of cooks in the kitchen. It feels
It feels like Danny just off of the recording. WTF, Danny? He's having issues, guys. For some reason, our app that we used to record is called StreamYard, and he uses his phone, and they've just been having a lot of issues recently. I use my laptop. It's okay, my
okay.
man. Yeah, you're back. Why don't you just jump right into it? Too many cooks
Yeah,
in the kitchen.
yeah. Paul Den, who wrote most of the sequels. There's another writer, Mort Abraham. The director is Ted Post. But I feel like I read somewhere that there might have been another director that he had taken over for. Maybe I'm confusing that with Escape. I'm not sure. But it just feels like you said, it feels like this movie starts off and it's meant to be one thing. And that one thing is just a pure retread of the original.
Yep.
And then somebody along the way was like, no, we have to go in a completely opposite direction. And it almost becomes this like bizarre like Morlocks episode, where it's like these humans that are still alive who have developed some insanely weird telepathy where
Yeah.
they don't where they don't talk, but they communicate via their thoughts, and then at one point they just go, okay, why don't we just use our mouths? You know what, the last 20 minutes of bizarre editing, ignore that, we're going to talk now.
Right.
And then it's, again, it becomes this weird where it's like, I just watched a review of this on an amazing YouTube channel, Dark Corners, that
Okay.
Chris got me hooked onto.
Nice.
And and what he says in the movie, in his review, is that it almost feels like they forgot that apes were supposed to be in this movie at one point, because we spend so much time with these humans, But then it gets so crazy where the humans pull their faces off and they reveal that
Yeah.
they're wearing human masks and that they've been affected by radiation and they
Yeah.
worship
The
the
bomb.
bomb,
Yep.
and that they are planning to effectively destroy the world to get rid of the apes. And meanwhile, the apes are in the middle of what appears to be almost like the beginnings of a ape civil war because the chimpanzees are protesting, uh, the gorillas are attacking them, the orangutans, Dr. Zayas is leading. There's this, maybe the most metal moment in a sci-fi movie from 1970 I could ever imagine,
Okay.
where these like Morlock humans use their telepathy to project an image of the ape
Lawgiver.
lawgiver, who is like basically a statue of Jesus, but as an ape,
Right.
bleeding
Yep.
while flames are going on.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, this is the most metal fucked up shit I've ever seen.
Sure
And it's
is.
and I'm like, what is happening? And like this movie was so boring just 15 minutes ago. And now it's fucking crazy.
Yeah. I love that sequence. I totally forgot about it. I actually forgot all about like the random fire that just shows up a few times throughout this movie.
Yeah.
It's really weird. You know, you always remember the mutant people at the end, and you know that they pull off their faces, like you said, they're all deformed, they're all like kind of irradiated. But I totally forgot about like how they try to make Brent kill Nova, and like how they try to make Taylor and Brent kill each other. They make these weird beeping noises. I forgot
We
all about that.
we do not commit violence. We make our enemies commit violence on each other. I'm like, that's kind of committing violence.
Right. Yeah.
Like I will not kill anybody, but here, take this gun and you better shoot him.
right. Right. Yeah, I mean the mutant stuff is so bizarre,
And,
but
and
the
like
ape.
that crazy editing where it's like they'll like these flash jumps of like just images between like their thoughts and James Franciscus like get out of my head,
Yeah,
and then it's so weird
it
that
is.
I genuinely am not sure if I even like this movie, but I know that I loved the last 30 to 40 minutes of it.
Well, it's funny because, like, you know, Danny and I are always texting each other, and he sends me this random text saying, "Escape from the Planet of the Apes is weird," and I was like, "Didn't you see Beneath too? Like, you know, like, why didn't you tell me it was weird then?" Yeah, it's so fucking nuts, and I love some of the artwork for this movie too. Some of the posters. My Alamo Draft House that I live in, I don't live at the Alamo Draft House, but the one that's in Cedar Park where I live is a Planet of the Apes themed Alamo Draft House. So it's got
That's
all these
awesome.
different Planet of the Apes movie posters from different countries. Like, you know, there's like a French one. There's this amazing poster of this movie where it has General Ursus, who I've had like at the bottom over here, Dr. Zayas. Doesn't really show the humans that much. And then it has like the side profile of one of the mutants, and it looks so good. I might like use that picture at some point in some of our thumbnail artwork. But it has a statue of Lawgiver too. And one thing I was going to bring up is I haven't seen the very last one in a long time, but I think that it does actually feature Lawgiver, or like the person that becomes Lawgiver. Um, they say that Lawgiver is a gorilla, but whenever I see the statue of him, I always feel like he looks like an orangutan. Do you feel that way too?
I mean, just based on what we know about the apes, I don't know if it makes sense for a gorilla to be the lawgiver. The gorillas are usually like the big brooding soldier types.
Yeah,
Uh, and I would assume it was an orangutan, especially like given the original, the entire tribunal is orangutans.
right, exactly.
Uh, and Dr. Zayas being like the most important of the ape characters we meet in terms of his status amongst the apes, and he's of course an orangutan. Um, I don't know. I Battle is the one movie I haven't seen yet, but I do know that apparently, while I was researching this and while I was like looking at IMDb and a couple other things, they mentioned that like there it was supposed to be a scene with Lawgiver in this, and that they cut it or that they decided not to use it, and they were going to hold that. And I think they do put that in Battle for the Planet of the Apes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I
So
mean, obviously,
since I'm still technically sick, I might have to watch that not too far after we stop recording.
yeah, yeah. And I'm gonna go for my walk after we start recording, and I'm gonna find that YouTube video of the behind the scenes because it's so good. I want to get all that behind the scenes goodness of this series. Let's kind of bring it to a close then. This movie, what's interesting is like it has that retread for most of it. Then it gets really fucking weird with the mutants. And then you have this ending. I remember like I'm like, okay, I know this is almost over. I paused it for a second, I think, because I had a phone call, and there was like 4 minutes left, and I'm like, wait a minute. I know that like Brent has to die, Taylor has to die, like Nova has to die, and then the fucking Charlton Heston has to blow up the planet. And I was like, wait, there's like 4 minutes left, and yeah, go
I
ahead, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I love that like this movie came out uh 25 years after we had dropped atomic bombs on Japan. The bomb that they have must be so much more powerful if it
Oh yeah.
literally destroys the world.
Yeah.
Like this is not an atomic bomb. This is like
Yeah.
a this is like in Star Wars. This is like a planet
Death
destroyer.
Star, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny because they worship it like a god. They have this disturbing church. That sequence where they're in the church is pretty long. They have like multiple hymns that they sing to the bomb, and they kind of call it like their god bomb, which always reminds me of The Stand, because there's like a character in The Stand that's like homeless person that's like the god. Oh no, he's in the Dark Tower. He's in the Dark Tower. He's like the god bomb, the god bomb. He's always saying that. Anyway, it's funny that they worship it and they call it like a god because the way that Brent recognizes that it's a bad, like it's a big deal, is because it has the symbols of Alpha and Omega, and that's the idea of like God. God is like the Alpha and the Omega, right? But like it has this like really brutal ending. I almost feel like this ending is worse than all the other ones combined, right? Because like Nova gets killed, and I don't know about you, but I was actually very sad when Nova got killed because I think that like Linda Harrison, she gets overlooked in this series. Like she's so emotive. She only says one word in 2 fucking movies, and it's like Taylor. Yeah, the way she says Taylor, right? But even the way she does
Never do that again.
Okay, sorry. Okay.
That was
But
terrifying.
but she's like so beautiful and she's innocent, and she goes along with Taylor, then eventually Brent, and I'm just really sad when that one ape comes in and shoots her.
So it took me, I had to rewind it to realize that the ape had actually fired the gun,
Yeah,
because she kind of just like gets thrown into the wall and is dead. And I'm like, wait, like Athena, who was not watching the movie with me, just happened to walk into the room, like looked at the screen and went, wait, she's dead? I was like, yeah, I don't know what happened. And I like actually had to go back and rewind it to be like, oh,
the machine gun
shot the gun. Okay. There's no blood there. It's just like you hear the shots and she gets like thrown into the wall and then her body just like slumps down dead.
Yeah.
But like Brent's death like comes out of nowhere. He's like, haha, and then like boom, boom. He gets like mowed down.
He's shot in the fucking head.
Yeah.
He's a bullet in his head.
That is an abrupt, like brutal kill for like what is basically your main character in this movie.
Yep.
And I was kind of like, I like did like a legit, whoa, okay, like holy shit.
Yeah.
And then I do love like that last image of like Taylor like in his final moment reaching
Absolutely. Yeah.
pulled down. And
So good.
again, my first thought at the end is, how did they make three more of these?
Yeah,
Like,
right, right, right. Exactly. It's such a crazy moment because, like I said, there's like fucking like 2 minutes left in the movie, and General Ursus has his apes, his gorillas, pull down the bomb, and like smoke comes out. It looks like it's like affecting them. And then I think Brent is the one that shoots General Ursus. He dies. Dr. Zayas is on the ground. Taylor actually gets shot before Brent, and he's like bleeding out. Um, and then it's funny because I always remember he says it's doomsday, but that's not the last thing he says. Like I think that they do like a little recap of this scene in the next movie, and I think they make it look like he says it's doomsday and he pushes the button. But like I think the last thing he says is like Dr. Zayas, you bastard. Like I think he like says some kind of fucked up thing to Dr. Zayas before he destroys the world, you know? And I just was kind of wondering because we haven't even really talked about Dr. Zayas, and since he's your namesake, what do you think about him in these two movies?
I love him.
Okay.
And it helps that yes, I took the name because of The Simpsons and the musical and everything about that scene. But it helps watching the original movie, and he is the most complex character for me.
Absolutely.
I genuinely love everything about Maurice Evans' performance. Uh, he the 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 fundamental juxtaposition of that defender of the faith, minister of science, and how he has to balance those two, and is there a way to balance those two, and how he and when you rewatch it and you realize how much he actually knows, and it kind of helps you like realize that during the tribunal scene, everything he's doing out of preservation for ape kind.
Yep.
And to me, he's just a fascinating character. I genuinely do love the character. I wish he had a little bit more to do in Beneath.
Yeah.
But I do like that he is like there at the end, that he makes it to that final moment. And I I think that the orangutans are just always my favorites. I
Yeah.
love like I they obviously named Maurice for Maurice Evans in the reboot trilogy, but
Right.
I love that giant orangutan. I remember feeling genuine tension during War for the Planet of the Apes. I'm like, they're not going to kill like I they can kill Caesar, but don't fuck with Maurice.
Right.
And
And there's Rocka in the new one too.
and Raka is my like runaway favorite character. Him and probably, I mean, he's not in the movie for that long, but I love King Proximus.
Yeah.
But yeah, I loved Raka in the new film, and I think that the orangutans are always kind of written to be the intellectuals,
Intellectuals. Yeah. Absolutely.
and it gives them the best sense of humor. Like
Yeah.
even like Dr. Zayas and the other people at the tribunal, when they're when Taylor is like speaking and he's making like act genuinely great points, and they're all just like, hear no evil, see
Yeah.
no evil.
The Three
So no,
Monkeys. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Fantastic stuff. Yeah.
and and it's so it's like they convey the humor in these tense situations. They make great points. They always seem to be like the moral compass of what's going on. And yeah, I think that Maurice Evans is just perfect, especially in the first movie. I love his voice too. Just
Yep. Yep.
I ever like that. I love how in the last the ending of the original movie, how he's so quick to he goes from being tied up, and Taylor is going down the beach, and he tells his men, leave him, let him go, who cares? blow up the cave.
Yeah.
You can't. And he's so quick. And then the second movie, Zira and Cornelius are like under investigation, and they're like, you totally fucked us, Dr. Zayas. And he's like, yeah, I did. I had to preserve ape kind. It's
Right.
like, so he's like that consummate bureaucrat, but he's also super intelligent. And I love characters like that are like so divisive and have like polar, like two different sides to them. Just great characters.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, that there's many flaws with the Mark Wahlberg movie, but I think one of the main reasons is that like they don't have that caste system with the three different types of ape the way they do in this. They kind of do, like aesthetically they do, but there isn't really a Dr. Zayas in that Mark Wahlberg one. There's that Tim Roth ape that's the lead one, but he's not even
I have
a
to
chimpanzee.
Fade, right? I have to definitely I have to rewatch this. We haven't said this, but every single Planet of the Apes movie, I believe, is on Hulu.
Yeah.
And I've been like binging Hulu. They have the original 5, they have the entire reboot trilogy, and they even have the
The
Mark
Mark
Wahlberg one,
Wahlberg.
which I am going to rewatch.
Yeah.
I remember the early 2000s when Hollywood tried to make a Stella Warren a thing. But it just fetch wasn't going to happen. And I'm going to rewatch that one. And then next week, we'll cover Escape, Conquest, and Battle.
Yes.
And I guess by that point, we'll be able to do a full 10 movie ranking.
Whoa, that's 10. Are we including the Mark Wahlberg one?
Yeah, 5
Oh,
original,
okay.
4 reboots.
I wonder which one will be on the bottom.
I don't, but
well, so we already are in the coming up on the Lastercast thing. There's also one more thing you should mention, Danny, that we're going to be recording soon too.
oh yes, very happy that one of our favorite shows from last year got renewed, and Interview with a Vampire on AMC just had its first episode. Episode 2 premieres tomorrow. We're recording this on Saturday, so tomorrow, Sunday, and Monday night we're going to be recording episodes 1 and 2 of season 2 of Interview with a Vampire on AMC to go along with our Apes month. So Apes and Vampires
Apes
in
and
May
Vampires
on the Lastercast.
Yeah. So make sure you're subscribed to get your Apes and Vampire kick, and we will see y'all next.